and that's where you can find this recording. We have a great lineup. I'm really appreciative of our school board member, Katie Ricard, who's going to be our first speaker. We're also going to talk about how the city is responding to the increased heat situation here. We have two folks from the city that are going to speak to that. And then our neighbor and Director of Planning and Development, Kevin Vaughn, is going to give us an update on where we are on the code refresh. As always, we will end with what's on your mind. Happy to talk about any of the things that have been presented on or other topics. But this is the core of our agenda for this evening, and I will welcome up our school board representative, Katie Ricard, at this moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. I just wanted to give a quick plug that on your way out, there is a QR code where you can sign up for my monthly newsletter. And I would love for you to do that. The newsletter not only has little spotlights on things that happened in District 2 schools that month that I think are particularly amazing. It also covers as a board what we're going to be doing that month in our meetings. I link relevant presentations. And then I also include something that interests me. So whether it's talk about what's happening in education, or maybe something specific about RPS or one of our community organizations. So no pressure, but if you want to learn more about RPS, I think you'll sign up. So I'm Katie Ricard, I'm the District 2 representative. I like to just remind everyone what schools are in District 2 because it actually changed with the election when they redrew the lines. But it's Carver Elementary, Richmond Success Academy, which is right by Abner Clay Park, Fox Elementary, the Richmond Technical Center, which is over on Westwood, and of course now Dogwood Middle School, which was also added. So those are our schools. A few dates that I just wanted to highlight for any parents that are in the room. On August 2nd from 10 to 3 at John Marshall High School is RPS Summerfest, and that's where they will have a lot of free backpacks and a lot of elementary schools come out with their principals so that our little ones can meet their principals and some teachers. And it's just a great organization. There's the lit limo, there's bounce houses, there's all sorts of free food and fun things. I went with my kids last year and we had a real blast. And the school board will be sponsoring their own table so that you can come and ask us questions that maybe you are have been dying to know or just haven't had time to contact us. The other date I want to pull out that is important for District 2 is Wednesday, August 6th from 5:30 to 7 o'clock is going to be the ribbon cutting for the new Fox Elementary School. Yay! And of course, just once again, special thanks to Catherine for all of her support in getting that school funded and built. We really appreciate it. But it's from 5:30 to 7. It'll open with some speeches from dignitaries, but then you will be able to go in and walk the halls and see inside Fox Elementary. And I know for many of us that is very exciting. So I just want to encourage you Wednesday, August 6th from 5:30 to 7 to please come out. Until then, Fox is hurriedly finishing up the big thing they're working on right now, which you can see from the outside is the landscaping. That was one of the last things to go. They're doing some final exterior painting. But what's today? This week, they started moving things from Clark Springs to Fox Elementary so that teachers can begin moving in that first week in August, if not sooner. Other things that I just wanted to draw your attention to is I did leave copies of the RPS calendar. Something new that's happening this year is that most of our students, well, some of our schools have already started, and if you didn't know, RPS 200 schools have started. That would be Oak Grove Bellmead, Fairfield Elementary, Woodville Elementary, and Cardinal Elementary. And those are schools that then get 20 extra days, a whole month of extra instruction. So they started on Monday. Most of our schools will start on Monday, August 18th. The only caveat to that is in our secondary schools. So on Monday, August 18th, it'll just be our 6th and 9th graders starting. And I am really excited for that. I For those of you who don't know, I came from Chesterfield as an assistant principal, and we did that for a number of years. And I was in a high school, it gave our freshmen one day to run their schedule, to do some culture and climate work, to meet their teachers without everyone else there. And it was just such a great day, and it meant that their second day, they felt a lot more confident when those upperclassmen came into the building. So we are going to be doing that for the first time this year. So that means for our middle and high schools, 7th, 8th, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders will then start on Tuesday the 19th. Elementary schools will all start on Monday the 18th. So a few other things. If you didn't know, Dogwood Middle School has a new principal. Her name is Dr. Latrice Younger, and she actually came from the state where she was doing culture and climate work for the Department of Education. But she's been an assistant principal working in Culpeper, Hanover, and Richmond. So we are really excited. She has hit the ground running, doing individual meetings with her teachers to see what they need and what support she can bring. And I know the community is really excited to have her there. Richmond Success Academy and Richmond Technical Center had new principals last year, and they have continued, and we're really excited that those schools will also kind of, now in their second year with these new administrators, really start to refine the things that they're working on. Speaking of Dogwood, we have a volunteer project that I wanted to highlight that is nearing completion. During the holiday tour for the Van District Association, Dogwood Middle School was on it because of its architecture. And what they decided was the walls looked rough, and there were a bunch of lockers that were no longer being used and were just zip tied shut and were kind of an eyesore. So with the Van District Association and other Van residents, they have taken out most of the lockers, which have then been scrapped, and money that has come from the scrap has then gone back into the school for a massive painting project that will probably take a few years, but this year we're focusing on kind of the bottom part of the walls. And we are almost done, but if you are free this Saturday from 9 to 12 and want to come help paint or even just tape walls, that would be amazing, because on Monday, Dominion Energy is coming in with 19 volunteers to really finish the project. But we're excited because it's going to allow teachers and students to walk into a school that just looks a little more cared for. Is it okay if I keep talking? Okay. I want to shout out with that a few other community organizations that really have taken care of our schools, and I don't know if you all know about them. So VCU, Kiwanis, Embrace Carver, and the Carver Castle, their Carver Neighborhood Association, have really come and taken Carver Elementary under their wing, providing things like literacy help, reading buddies, funding and additional literacy specialists for that school. VCU serves as their crossing guards every day, so that the students can interact with their officers. They show up for field day, and we're just really grateful for all that they do. I'm about to talk about federal funding. We need everything we can get from our community organizations, and I'm just really appreciative for them. The Fan District Association has really supported Dogwood and Fox. VCU is also supporting the Richmond Success Academy, which we're grateful for, and the Technical Center needs someone, so I'm going to be working on that. They used to be part of District 3. They're kind of more in the north side, but they are part of District 2, and so we're looking for someone to come alongside. What I would say is if you have a business that is more trade oriented, and it was something that maybe the students could come shadow or see that, or even if you wanted to come speak to them, that is something that the principal, Dr. Davenport, is always looking for. She's looking for those partnerships. So the last two things I wanted to talk about is our early literacy data, which if you picked up a calendar was on the back. We don't have all our data yet from our state testing. We're still waiting on graduation rates and all those exciting things, but I just wanted to talk about our early literacy data. The state this past school year adopted a new test called the BALS. Before that, it was the PALS for our K-2. The VALS was definitely harder for our students, and it was harder for everyone across the state. So last year, we finished around 65% of our students showing that they had achieved the level of their grade. When we took the test in the fall, it actually went down to 51%, which showed us that they hadn't lost that much over the summer. There was a summer slump, but not that much. And we saw that across the state that the new standards were more rigorous, which is not a bad thing. High expectations, when we have them and we have the support and the teachers, our students do reach them. So we ended the year back up at 65%, which meant we gained 14 percentage points from our fall to our spring, which is a lot, and we anticipate the state average will not be that much. One of the reasons was we adopted a new curriculum for our K-2 called U-Fly, which teachers really like, and as a parent of a first grader, I will say is more rigorous than what my other two were doing in first grade. But I also just wanted to highlight these individual subgroup scores. So for instance, our English learners jumped 33 percentage points from their fall to their spring. Our Latino students, 23%, our economically disadvantaged, 18%, our grade 1 kiddos, 16%, students with disabilities, 10%, Black, 12%, and white, 8%. Those are huge gains, and we're really excited by them, and this was just our first year with the curriculum. So that tells us that we hope, as our teachers get stronger with it and used to it, as our students get used to it, those gains are only going to increase. You know, our goal in the next 5 years is that by grade 3, all of our students are reading at grade level. And the reason why that is so important is if they are reading on level by grade 3, it means they are less likely to drop out down the line. And when our students don't drop out, that means they're most likely, when they graduate, going into jobs, going into more learning, enrolling in the military, all good things for our kids. So the final thing I just wanted to mention was we finally have figured out the impact of the federal funding cuts for RPS. And there will be more presentations on this at our August board meeting, but it looks like we will lose to the tune of $3.3 million from Titles 1, 2, and 3 grants and our adult and literacy education grants. For this year, we are able to find that money from other funding sources that we have, from grants that are still on the books. But if that does not get restored, it's going to become an issue in future years. So I would just encourage you to continue to advocate with your state and federal representatives to protect our funding for our schools. It's going to be an even leaner year for the city next year. We know we can't lose $3.3 million again next year. Who does that impact? It very much impacts our multilingual learners. It impacts our K-2 class sizes, which we, through those grants, keep smaller so that we can really focus on literacy in those early ages. And it also impacts some of our culture and climate work in our schools. So that's everything I have to say. I know that was a lot, but do I have any questions?
Katie, thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming, and again, all of our schools can use your love and attention. You don't have to have a student in RPS. You don't have to have had any affiliation with RPS to make an impact there. So definitely sign up for Katie's newsletter and be on the lookout for ways to give back. Our next agenda item is the city's efforts to help with the ongoing increase in heat temperature. So there are two different approaches to that. I would welcome up Tiffany and Daniel at this time. It's sort of a 1-2, I would say, punch on what we're trying to do here. There's the built environment and then also the services. So I will let you decide which order you think makes the most sense. Okay, with that, second district resident Daniel Klein will kick us off here. Daniel is also with the Office of Sustainability.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Daniel Klein. I am the Sustainability Coordinator for the Office of Sustainability. I also live in the second, so I was already planning to be here. It's great to be invited to get to talk about this Richmond Cool There's some flyers at the table when you walk in. There's a few copies of this as well. You can get this online on our website, which is rvagreen2050.com. I want to talk a little bit about what it is and how it works. So when we think about heat, urban heat, cities are hotter than suburban and rural areas. That's usually because of buildings and streets and parking lots and less green space and less tree canopy. So there's a lot of things we can actually do to help cool down the city. This document is part of RVA Green 2050, which is our climate equity action plan. This is essentially the plan that our office works from. It includes things like waste reduction efforts, transportation, green transportation, growing the green economy. This document is one of the 136 action items that we have to get done over the next 6 years. And it falls under the category of heat mitigation. So what that means is, how do you cool down the city? Tiffany's going to talk about heat management, which is how do we respond to the impacts of heat? How do we ensure that people are protected from heat-related illness? But this document is really a guide for city staff and for the public for strategies that you can use to cool down private property, public property, etc. So I recommend everyone take a look at it when you get a chance. But it breaks down strategies into 4 categories. The first is urban greening. That refers to planting trees, planting plants, thinking about the green space around your property and how you can plant more trees and create more shade. Trees cool down our city in 2 ways. They create shades, which just block the sun from hitting the ground or hitting buildings, which prevents it from absorbing and then radiating all that heat. But they also do a thing called evapotranspiration. Does anybody know what that is? Okay, so trees have roots. They take water up from the ground, it goes up into their leaves, and then it evaporates. And when it does that, it pulls away higher. Kind of like when you sweat and your sweat evaporates and cools you off. Trees do the same thing. So they cool in 2 ways. They kind of shade and protect us from direct sunlight, but they also kind of act like air conditioners. So trees are one of the cheapest, easiest things that we can do as a city to cool down. The second major category in this document is shade. Build shade. So not just shade from trees, but structures, shade sails, shade walls, things that just provide some respite from direct sunlight. So when it comes to protecting people from heat-related illnesses like heat exhaustion, heat stroke, shade is a really great way to help prevent that, just getting folks out of direct sun. So there's a whole section here on different types of shade structures that the city has deployed and will continue to deploy, but that you can also consider as a homeowner or business owner, things like awnings, things like building overhangs, even lightweight canopies. So if you own a business and you want to protect your patrons from the sun, you want to attract clients or attract customers, thinking about these strategies might really help in some months. The third strategy is smart surfaces. What that refers to is the color and the material that we build our built environment out of. So if you have a black roof, your top floor is probably a lot hotter than if your roof is a lighter shade color. And it has a huge difference. So if you want to bring your energy bill down, if you have a lighter roof, that's going to do a lot. Solar panels do the same thing because the solar panel absorbs the heat and protects your actual roof. So it actually acts as like a shade for your roof. So the third one is obviously green roofs. That's where folks have like living plants that are drought tolerant. That helps cool down the whole building. So if you're looking to like reduce your cooling bills in the summer, the whole smart surfaces section is really for you. And the fourth one is called depaving. That is impervious surface removal. That refers to, say, a parking lot that's like kind of underutilized. That's the thing in the neighborhood that's probably absorbing and radiating some of the most heat. So if you can think about paved surfaces, we are thinking that as a city, what are the paved surfaces that are underutilized and could be better served in different ways. But as a homeowner or business owner, if you have paved surfaces that are underutilized, you can remove them, you can replace them with green, you can replace them with permeable pavers, So there's a whole range of solutions. There's 25 in here. This is sort of new. Cities don't have, like, very few cities have something like this. I did a lot of research on other cities, mostly in the southeast, but also out west. Phoenix is like leading the charge on shade policy. Miami has really great sort of heat mitigation strategies. New York has a really great program where they help folks resurface their roofs with lighter colors. So this document is primary audience is city staff. I'm working in the city to teach more folks about this so that they can integrate these solutions into their projects. But it's applicable into any space. So take a look at it. My name is Daniel Klein. I'm daniel.klein@rva.gov. So if you have questions or you've got ideas or if you have concerns, I'd love to hear how you're interpreting and using this document. Can I open up to a couple questions? Or okay, are there any questions?
I know that there are incentives for business owners to do things like install lighting or security cameras. Are there any incentives if business owners implement any of these components?
Great question. There are some grants. For example, the American Association of Dermatologists has grants for shade structures. There are things like VCAP, which I think the city may participate in the future. That would help like offset the cost of green infrastructure. So if you wanted to like depave your parking lot or your driveway and replace it with permeable pavers, that helps with some of the costs. There are a range of resources in the document that point to different funding things, but part of my goal, what I'll say is that in RVA Green, the plan, there is an action that speaks to a smart surfaces or cool surfaces program. If our budget increases and we're able to create that kind of program, then we would be able to do that kind of direct to business, like either grant or technical assistance. It's a great question. Another question? Yes.
So I was wondering, so I'm not entirely familiar with the district lines. I live in the Fan, which I think is the second district. But then in the Diamond, I've noticed driving through there during, it wasn't even a tropical storm, even the rainstorm before the tropical storm. I didn't go out during a tropical storm. I noticed that like Arthur Ashe Boulevard and Myers Street and a few other cross streets below Lake Street are like, they just, it doesn't take much to flood them to the point that it can easily damage low cars like mine. Arthur Ashe Boulevard was impassable. There was a crashed car because of the hit and run sitting in the middle block and I said that. Basically, the north side was cut off from downtown for a little while, and from my understanding, from what I've heard and been told, it's basically they put in all that development there and all the new demand on the drainage system. So they removed the natural drainage and didn't put in enough man-made drainage to compensate. And the solution of separating the stormwater and sewage systems to have adequate drainage for all the new buildings is not attainable, right? That would cost billions of dollars. Richmond couldn't afford that without federal assistance. It's not going to get right now. So I was wondering what, if any, plans there are to make that issue less severe there, because the next time we get a Category 1 or Category 2 hurricane, I don't think it's going to go very well in the document.
Great question. A lot of the strategies in this deal with heat mitigation and reducing heat risk for communities, but they also double as reducing flood risk. So like green infrastructure, the types of infrastructure where it's landscaped with trees and allows the rain to flow down into the soil and prevents flooding. Because when it is gray infrastructure, it's basically like a big funnel, and it has to get funneled into the drain and then treated. So the effort for many cities is to make the city more porous or more spongy, so that when it rains, it sort of absorbs that rainfall instead of pushes that all out, which creates flood. The city in March adopted a green infrastructure master plan through DPU that talks a lot about how to mitigate flood risk using infrastructure. And one of the things that it's helpful to remember is that this is an old city. They were not designing it for 21st century climate change. They were designing it for, This is really about looking at the existing infrastructure. When it's time to fix things, fixing it better. When it's time to think about project specification. These types of strategies will help if we integrate them into like future projects. Our office did make a resilience assessment map for the city. You can also find it on our website, so you can see the whole city and see which areas are at the highest risk for flooding or for heat. So green infrastructure and increasing the porosity really helps reduce flood risk. And I believe the city has adopted something called sustainable design standards, which applies to future projects that reach a certain budget threshold. A lot of those refer to green infrastructure, which would help reduce flood risk. So if you have flooding on your property, think about how much of your property is covered and where you can integrate plants, trees, or even permeable pavers. Great question. Anybody else?
Given global warming, right, and what kind of expectations do you have for this stuff to mitigate, the global warming that's being caused by humongous factors way out of control?
It's a good question. We talk about this a lot in our office. This is, if we're able to implement these types of strategies, this can do a lot for cooling down neighborhoods. It can do a lot for reducing flood and heat risk. Can't do anything about like the types of weather that we know is coming to Richmond, which is more heat, hotter hot days, longer hot days, and more rain, more extreme rain, where it rains more faster. So the idea is that we can increase the resilience of Richmond and individual neighborhoods by preparing for those types of events, right? So that's thinking of integrating these types of things into our building. But a lot of our work is not just sustainability, which would be like more sustainable practices. It's also about resilience. So it's more like preparing for the impact. So the way I think about it is like sustainability is like taking our foot off the gas, and resilience is buckling up, right? So it's like we know that climate change is going to cause these things, and so what we can do is prepare. And that's where it comes down to what our office can do, but also individuals in your community. I think it's super important that we know our neighbors and we are able to help each other out in times of like disaster response, while the city is gearing up to provide additional more holistic response. But there are many cities around the world who are doing this type of thing. We're going to see more and more cities adopt things like heat mitigation guides, heat strategies, because that's sort of like the future that we're heading into. But on a local level, these things really help. If we're shading our playgrounds, if we're shading our basketball courts, our dog parks, if we're incorporating misters and fans into our stadiums and our arenas, then we have like really good tools for still enjoying our lives as we have hot summers. And this book goes into kind of what to expect, like what we can do about it, and so I really recommend diving.
Thank you.
More question?
I do think, just because we've got some other presentations coming, but I'm sure Daniel will be happy to answer more. And we have a Sustainable Resilient Commission, that's a city commission, and anyone who's interested in this topic, please, you can participate in person. They also have virtual options to participate, and the meetings are at the library. But
and you can find dates and times and RSVP for those meetings if you want, also on our website. So that's rvagreen2050.com. There's a whole page on it. Sustainability and Resilience Commission. Join, attend, share your thoughts, ask your questions, spread this.
yeah, I'm grateful the city is doing a lot. We have great people doing that work. I'm going to welcome up Tiffany Ford. She's Director of Neighborhood and Community Services. And obviously there's the built adaptations that we're trying to do to keep people comfortable, and but there's also beyond that, what are we doing to the person who needs to be directed to a cooling center, et cetera. So Tiffany, thank you for being here to share those types of services and actions that the city's undertaking.
All right, hi everybody, I'm Tiffany Ford, as you said. I have been with the city since November, and I'm over the Neighborhood and Community Services. So I oversee Office of Homeless Services, Office of Neighborhood Engagement, Children and Family, Aging and Disability Services, and Immigrant and Refugee. So really big deals. But right now, we're here to talk about extreme heat. And so primarily the office that is in charge of that is the Office of Homeless Services. And so the city, along with with that office, along with other partners in the city, are responsible for setting up cooling centers. We have the cooling centers that are overseen by social services. And so that is at Marshall Street, that location on Marshall Street and Southside Plaza. And that runs Monday through Saturday. And I think the hours are from, just make sure, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. And so when you go there, you can get out of the heat, but you can also get a bottle of water. And so if you see anybody on the street that looks like they need help and you're near that area, please direct them there. If it just seems like they need a little bit of help, obviously, if they look like they're in severe distress, please call 911 and see if you can, get them somewhere cool or get them somewhere settled until emergency services arrive. In addition to the social services, we also have our libraries. Our libraries have extended hours on Sundays, so they're a respite for folks. And primarily I deal with the unhoused, but when we're talking about this situation, because of those of us who are privileged enough, we have places where we can be. But I want to make sure that you understand that all of these are open to all of our residents. So anybody can go there if they need a respite from the heat. So I talked about our libraries. Like I said, some of them are open on Sundays, so that's important every day. And they operate in their normal operating hours. But additionally, don't forget we have pools. We have 7 of them. They operate from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday, and on the weekends from 12 to 7. And then finally, a big part of my job is checking the weather. Pretty much I check it every day, but formally I check it Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And when the temperature is 92 degrees or higher for 2+ consecutive hours, then I activate the Salvation Army's cooling center. And so we operate that. We try to say from 11 to 5, so there people can get snacks, they can get water. Of course, it's cool, but really what it is as long as the temperature is under 92 degrees, then we have it operating from 11 to 5. But if it goes beyond that, then I adjust. So I think on Friday and Saturday, it's going to be over from 11 to 7. And I have this information. It's handy dandy, homemade flyer, but this is just the overview. And if you need up-to-date information, like I said, I update it pretty much every 48 hours. So if you go to our website on the city, we update it every time I send an update, they get it. And of course, I send it to the city council members so they know as well. Let me see. I think I want to go back to what my offices do. Obviously, we deal with the priority population. So like I said, we have our aging and disability, we have our children and families, we have our unhoused, and we have our immigrant and refugee engagement. And so I look at it as kind of like Marvel, like we all come together to be superheroes for the community. A good example of that is when we had the water crisis. It was my team that got together, along with a lot of others, but I'm really proud of my team. We got together and provided water to the city, to those priority populations, and made sure that they had what they needed. It was our job to make sure that we were connecting with our nonprofits and folks who we serve to make sure that, hey, not even the nonprofit, but even like the big 6, our public housing, to say, hey, do you have what you need? So when I say we're Marvel, we kind of are. Think of us as superheroes that try to be there for our populations in the community. If you have questions about things, all of the topics I've covered, I'm talking about immigrant and refugee engagement or the unhoused population, you want to know how you can serve or how you can help, please feel free to go to our website, Neighborhood and Community Services, on the City Hall website. We're doing great work. We want to make sure that we're partnering with the community and listening, because we don't know everything, and we want to make sure that we're as responsive as possible. But I'm really proud of our team. I'm really proud of our city. I gotta say, I am not Sorry, I am deaf, but I'm happy to be here. year one Richmond. I'm a Richmonder, been here all my life. So happy to hear you talking about our public school system because I came up through that. So anyway, thank you all. If you have any questions, anybody have any questions? Not one? All right, well, thank you.
Thank you, Tiffany, and thank you, Daniel. I mean, extreme heat really is a killer, particularly for our vulnerable population. So I really appreciated Daniel's comments about looking out for your neighbors in your community. With that, I think we've got a good point here to have a really robust conversation about code refresh. So I'm going to invite 2nd District resident Kevin Vaughn, our Director of Planning, to let us know where we are in the process. And I appreciate those of you who have reached out to my office already. We always welcome those comments about any planning process that's happening, but make sure, and I think we always do try and reply with this information, make sure that you're using the formal engagement process because we want to capture everyone's comments equally. All right, Kevin, thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for having me this evening. So just want to talk a little bit about code refresh, the process of rewriting our entire zoning ordinance. Most of you are probably familiar. Zoning, right, shapes what you can build, where you can build it, how you can use it. It sets the rules, right, for how our city looks, how it feels, how it operates, how it grows, how it develops. And so this is a very important process and why we need so much engagement in terms of, right, we haven't done this since the 1970s. We've done little bits and pieces, but it's been really since the 70s since we've really taken a comprehensive look at our zoning ordinance. And so, right, where we're at in the process right now, we have now released the draft maps and we have the draft districts in place. So if you want to see a map, I've got one of the north side over there and can spend some time answering questions if you have specific questions. As Councilmember Jordan said, the best way is to go through the formal channels so that we can capture everything all together. RVA.gov/code refresh. There's also a handout up at the table here if you want to take with you. It's got a QR code to get you quickly there. Right now, the draft map is open for comments. And so what you can do is you can go online. You can print out a map if you want, or you've got a plotter, you just want to get a big PDF and go in and look at it and study it. But you can also go in, there's an interactive map where you can zoom in to any particular parcel in the city. You can click on it and you can see, all right, what is the current zoning right now? What is the proposed zoning for it? And then there's a link that will take you to, all right, the proposed zoning, what are those regulations that are going to be put forth with that new zone? So you can understand, also part of that draft is, right, the use tables. What are the form requirements, right? How wide does your lot have to be? How tall can you build? Where does it have to be set? What are some of the uses you can have on it? These are all open for comments right now. So, we've got 78,000 plus parcels in the city. I know with the draft map, we did not get everyone right. So that's why we need as many eyes as we can get on this, because this really helps, in two ways. One, kind of the overall look at the districts of are we getting it right? Are we not? And in what ways, if we're not, do we need to adjust? But then also, again, that fine-grained detail of parcel by parcel, it makes a difference. Well, maybe you didn't realize that parcel A does not have the same attributes as parcel B, and so you have it zoned the same, they should be zoned differently. Those are the things, right? Down to the finest detail that we would like to know as part of this process. So, with that, I think, as we, have this out there, we're going to be open through September, and we're going to civic associations, community groups, just going through and doing as much outreach as we can, having discussions about, again, what these districts are or what it may mean. And so we encourage everyone to participate in that up through September. If we need to extend it a little longer, we will. But with that, then we'll take back and make some adjustments to the map. We'll also be coming out with rules of interpretation and regulation, some of say into the fine details later this year. We'll also in most likely late summer, early fall, which is almost here. Talk about additional things, layering and overlay districts. So right now, we're trying to get the base zoning right? So that you have a good idea of what you can do on your property. There's also been discussion, and I know in a second, there's concerns about demolitions. And so are there places in the community where you would like to see an overlay that more closely regulates demolitions? I will say, right, like, it's very tough, if not impossible, for us to stop a demolition. But there are processes that we can go through to, I'll say, slow it down or take a look in terms of providing opportunities to do documentation or say, hey, maybe let's take a time out. Is there another adaptive reuse we can do with this? So that's another layer above. There's another layer above that we're going to consider, and that is design overlays. So perhaps for new construction, do you want to be a little more particular about how structures look as they're built in a neighborhood, especially a neighborhood that's existing? And then also city-owned historic districts, which we have many of in the city that are, I'll say, the most regulating in terms of architecture. And so those are going to be opportunities for, again, I'll say civic-driven, neighborhood-driven opportunities to say, do you want to have additional layers of regulation on top of that base zoning? And so we'll be providing some templates for groups to look at, and again, have those conversations as we move forward to see if there's an appetite for the property owners in that district to have additional regulation on top of the base zoning. But the base zoning is where we're at right now. We're trying to get it right. We are trying to, I will say, legalize and capture much of the built environment that exists already. For most of us in the second district, right? Most of our properties do not conform to current zoning, so you cannot build them today. So at least we're trying to raise the bar to get it so that they're legal. And we're thinking about, right, what's the next step in terms of our city's growth? And so when we talk about growth, what's the next step of organic growth, incremental growth? How do we look at welcoming more residents, growing more businesses, and how do we take, very thoughtfully that next step of growth? So, again, district maps out there. Right now, we'll be talking about overlays in a few weeks and having some of those discussions. Through the fall, we'll be going back and forth and refining the maps. We'll be having another set of open houses, most likely in October and in November. The goal is to bring this all together for something to present to the Planning Commission and Council in early 2026, probably February is where we're targeting right now. But right now, again, when I say this is really important, is because this is going to kind of shape the conversation as it moves forward. So that's kind of an overview of where we're at. I don't know if there's anything specific you wanted me to touch on, or I'm happy to answer questions.
I think that was a great kickoff to the conversation, and I know there are working groups taking place in addition to these open houses. Are those public working groups, or how can folks who are interested in this continue to be engaged, maybe at an even deeper level than just commenting?
Yes. So, right, there's and again, all this is on rva.gov/code refresh. In terms of just different ways to get involved, we have a zoning advisory committee. They meet once per month. They meet the second Wednesday at 4 p.m. at City Hall. And they are a group of stakeholders appointed by the Planning Commission to kind of go through and vet this as we move through. Those are public meetings. They take public comment at the beginning. They also, if you want to submit comment to the members, you can do that as well. So there's another opportunity. I'll say another layer is they've appointed working groups. These working groups are taking, I'll say, a deeper dive into some specific issues framed around some of the subjects in Richmond 300. So high quality places, thriving environment, and these are, again, open to the public. You're welcome to come and participate. There's instructions on the Code Refresh page if you want to get involved. All of these meetings are being posted, or you can contact Marianne Pitts, Deputy Director in our office, if you'd like to participate directly in that. And what they do is really get into the details of the regulations, or really try to understand the implications of, if we change the zoning, what might this mean for the environment? What might this mean for housing? And so trying to look at it through different lenses, trying to understand, I'll say, just from a 360 approach, all the different ways that zoning may impact different facets of our community. So those are also open. well. And again, in addition just to the mapping we have right now, and we'll have another set of workshops most likely come out this fall, and probably another set in the early 26th if we work on finalization.
Wonderful, and I mean, I would just say there are tensions in any conversation like this when you're talking about zoning or planning issues in the future of a city, so that'll continue to play out. And I think what I would encourage, and I hope everyone here who's been following it, please help make sure folks know about it. Make sure your neighbors know about it, whatever groups you're involved in, and I would say our experience in our office is that the planning department is very generous in their time. They want to get this information out. So whether you're reading it from this meeting or going to one of the planning commission's meetings, we want to see everyone feeling up to speed on this and like they understand the process and how to engage with it. My goal is always, by the time something comes to a vote of council, people feel like, one, they understand what we're voting on, that they had a part in shaping that process, and that they understand why we're there. So I don't want any of this to be a surprise. Help us get the word out. If you're here, you're one of our highly engaged constituents. But there are people who just don't have the time or the interest to follow it, but it's going to impact them. I think maybe at this point we would open it up to questions. Okay, anyone have a question? Let's start with Cody, and then, yes, sir?
The existing plan starts with a set of principles. It includes sunlight, green space, all these things. If there is a set of principles that the current proposal is built on, I couldn't find it, or it wasn't immediately evident. I don't want to get into all the lists. We have, the people that in my area have a lot of deep concerns. It doesn't feel like, hey, this was built for you. It seems like it's built to me, like it was built for somebody else. I don't want to get into my laundry list. But do you have a set of principles? And the follow-up question is, do you envision this getting a referendum so that we can vote on it, or is this going to be a city council decision?
This is a city council vote, correct?
Yes. So in terms of ultimately, just from a process standpoint, staff will make a recommendation to the city planning commission. City planning commission will make a recommendation to the city council. Ultimately, the city council decides on adoption. And so they decide on adoption. They also decide on effective date and when it takes place. But ultimately, it's the governing body that will make the final decision on this. You asked about guiding principles, and maybe this is something you could probably maybe illustrate on the website more directly. If you go back to the first zoning advisory committee, and I think there's also a presentation to city council stating the objectives of what we're trying to do with this zoning code. So the real genesis comes out of Richmond 300. The 6 big moves that said, all right, we created this master plan for the city, aspiration, right? This is who we want to be as a city. And then talked about, what that built environment looked like. Talked about, again, kind of the 5 categories of the working groups. Talked about, healthy places. We talked about housing, talked about equity. And then it said, all right, if we want to be this city, like here's the things we need to do. And there's like hundreds of things in there. But it started with 6 big moves and said, if you want to do this, 6 big moves. One of those big moves was rewrite the zoning ordinance. And it said, all right, we can get there without redoing the zoning ordinance. Now, again, the zoning ordinance, like zoning, won't will us into that, but at least will remove some of the barriers and provide some opportunities to move us towards that. In terms of, I'd say, pulling objectives from Richmond 300 that we started with is that, again, we haven't redone our zoning ordinance since the 1970s. So just in terms of cultural, demographic, economic realities are much different today than they were in 1972. We're a much different Richmond than we were in 1972, so we're trying to acknowledge that and recognize that. We are acknowledging that we are 62.5 square miles, and I don't see the General Assembly changing that anytime soon, so we got to figure out how to use our land in the best, most effective, efficient way possible. We have to acknowledge that the way zoning has been used historically in the city, it's been used to exclude. And And so we have to acknowledge that role that it has played in creating separation in our communities. And I think that's evidenced when you look at our city. You can have, right, two individuals who grew up very close to each other with much different life expectancies. The zoning and the built environment and the places that people grow up have a direct impact on that. And so we're acknowledging what that is. We are also looking at, it's no secret, right, in terms of housing and what we need, in terms of the availability and affordability of units. So how do we provide for more housing in the city? And then acknowledging Richmond is growing, and we're growing at a rate that hasn't been seen in some time. And so it's interesting, like, we are not back to our max population that we once were, and actually a max population with a smaller physical footprint, but we're a growing city. And so how do we, understand people are moving there? So putting all of those things together, and I think just as a side note, we're not gonna get into it fully here, but I think some of the things that the Cultural Heritage Stewardship Plan has talked about is also looking at, like, how do we grow in a way that, like, still retains the Richmondness of Richmond, and that is, like, right, we're not taking away the essence of, like, what makes Richmond, our uniqueness. And so things where we talk about, how do we maintain, preserve, enhance the qualities, the uniqueness that makes Richmond the place that it is, balancing all those things together. Like you said, there's tensions and there's pulls in that, but that is, I'll say, like, the direction that we've provided from Richmond 300 and from, I'll say, our council and guiding documents that shape that.
I would really appreciate a list of principles. It was really helpful looking at the existing one, because I didn't really see anything wrong with the existing ones. They made a lot of sense to me. And on your last point, I think that's my biggest issue with what I see, is it really seems to say, hey, forget what's there. We don't care about that. We want growth and density, growth and density, growth and density. Everything else
Not
can wait.
necessarily affordability.
Yeah, density, growth, density, growth. So that's what it seems to me, looking at it, and everything else can wait. So I really didn't see that, what you were saying. So that's just our impression. We'll follow the process, I'm sure.
Another question for Director Wong on the zoning refresh. Yes.
Director Vaughn, two questions for you. You talked about process. You talked about the planning south making the recommendation to the planning commission, who will then make a recommendation to council. And so the cultural heritage stewardship plan was recommended by yourself to the planning commission, now it's in subcommittee. So can the planning commission take all of the work that we're all working on collectively and change that before it goes to the city council?
That is a good question.
Yes. We have a really funky charter, right, that divides responsibilities. So in the case of something like the Cultural Heritage Stewardship Plan, what has been proposed is that it's been proposed as an amendment to our master plan. So what we would like to do, or has been recommended, is to say, all right, this Heritage Stewardship Plan, we would like to attach that as an amendment to our master plan. The master plan has a legal standing in terms of it is one of the things that we look at when we do rezonings, right? Further the master plan, when we do special use permits, further the master plan, and when we do this, again, funky charter thing, location, character, extent, so like city facilities, the outlay of the city, the roads, the streets, the parks, all the facilities, further the master plan, right? And so by adopting an amendment to the master plan that includes a cultural heritage stewardship plan, it's saying, hey, in our planning world, we feel these things are of value, and it provides a lot of recommendations, right, for policies to move forward. When it comes to the master plan, city charter is very specific. The planning commission adopts, the council approves. And so it is a procedural step that council cannot do any master planning without planning commission. It needs to go through planning commission first. And basically, council gets a yes/no vote. And if they don't like it, they can say no, and they can maybe direct planning commission what to do, but planning commission can ignore those recommendations. So it's a really, like, it's an odd check and balance process. But that is strictly for master planning. When it comes to zoning, commission is purely advisory. And so whatever planning, let's say, I think talking through is staff makes a recommendation, planning commission ignores all of staff and decides to go like over to B and then sends it to council. Council can decide to like take the planning commission's recommendation, or they can decide to take the staff's recommendation, or they can decide to do something totally different. So it is just recommending up to council. Council, ultimately, that process has to go through planning commission, but ultimately, council can do what it wants. Did that answer your question? Maybe not how you want it, but like, did that answer it?
They answered my question, and it certainly doesn't give me great reassurance that the work of your group for several years now could all be derailed based on a few people deciding that they don't feel fit on the commission.
Yeah, and I will say, you know, I wouldn't say derail in terms of, I think, you know, again, we come from a spot, in this case, right, we're bringing in consultants to help us with some of this advice. You know, our job is to provide that advice to the planning commission. Planning commission, I think, can take a little broader look in terms of like, right, their lived experiences and make recommendations. I would say even if planning commission makes a recommendation to like not move forward with it, that paper, that ordinance still advances to city council. And so city council can override planning commission and say, all right, nope, we disagree, we support staff, we support the consultant, we're gonna move forward with it. Or they could say, yep, planning commission's right, they found some flaws, we agree with planning commission, send it back, don't adopt. But I will say that the planning commission for the zoning code, because it's an ordinance, is an advisory body.
Yeah, I would say, you know, going back to what Kevin said earlier, the master plan is really where council was not able to have much influence. We tried to add amendments afterwards, and that's controversial. There's some people who are very upset about that. We sent those amendments back to planning commission, and they rejected every single one. Now, when it comes to something like the heritage, the cultural, I get it wrong every time because they changed it, but the CHSB, you know, I shared folks' frustration that that plan, A, did not have public comment at the meeting, and then B, you know, was sent down into committee. So I have expressed, you know, what I heard and what I also feel, which is a disappointment in where we are right now with the commissioner, the president of the commission, and you know, said like, look, this is something that people really invested in, and I think is very important to get adopted before we go through this rezoning, right? Because I think if people feel a little bit of confidence that there's guiding principles and values, as you mentioned, about the way our city looks and values its, you know, its culture and its history, then I think we'll have more constructive and less anxious conversations about the zoning. So in that conversation, I did, you know, express my desire if planning commission cannot get it out of planning commission, okay, well, maybe it's not an amendment to the master plan, maybe it's a standalone plan that council adopts. And so that's my release valve if I feel like we can't get it out of there. And then there are also recommendations from that plan that council can move forward independently of it. One of them, which we've recently been given the ability to do by the General Assembly, and again, for those who maybe aren't familiar with this, we can only do as a locality what the General Assembly tells us we can do. So now, after, you know, thankfully our Richmond delegation has heard some of the concerns we've had about demolitions. They are now allowing us to increase the fines for unauthorized demolitions. So, I mean, that's like the lowest bar, right? So, Sven, Second District Liaison, I don't think we've shouted you out yet. Sven Phillips and I have started that process for that piece of the paper. I'm equally interested in how we slow down demolitions, period. I've voted against demolition in the exempt district. You know, that property is vacant now. That project didn't even happen. So I think a lot of the, I would say a lot of the outreach that we've gotten from our office so far is usually based on that sort of anxious fear of what's going to happen to this neighborhood that we love, the city that we love. And I think if we can start to address some of those concerns, I think a lot of us would feel better. But hope that addresses at least part of your question when it comes to those concerns.
Just a quick follow-up. I know that the comments at the subcommittee are Monday at 10 a.m. Has that changed about the cultural heritage stewardship plan? And what are the next steps after public comments?
So that committee is charged with bringing something back to the full body in terms of recommendations that they feel should be made to the plan in order to get planning commission to support it moving forward. So I don't know if that's gonna take a formal form of a red line document or a memo outlining some things. I participated in the last meeting trying to, I'll say, be a facilitator, and I think, you know, whether it's true policy changes to wordsmithing to like make it more clear what the intent is of that. Their goal is to provide something back to the planning commission to say, hey, we're gonna recommend these changes to the plan, and we think that will be able to get it moved forward at planning commission.
And there's a lot in this. I mean, this is a weighty topic, so, yeah, I think we expect to spend more time on it. Any other questions for Director Long on rezoning? If you don't mind me asking a bonus question?
It's your meeting.
All right, thank you, I appreciate that. So one thing you said early on when we were talking about the code refresh is let's make it easy to build the things we want to see and really hard to build the things we don't want. And top of that list for me are the vape shops. So what can you do, because every time you turn around, there's another vape shop opening. And I know that we've got that paper, we've been tracking it. I don't know what the amendment was, it being continued. Can you speak to that a little bit? Thanks.
Yes, I can talk to you offline about the amendment process and some ideas. But I think so what we are trying to do is establish, right now we don't have any definition of like vape shop. And so, of course, bureaucratic ease, it's retail sales of tobacco and hemp, which are defined in Code of Virginia. So we're going to rely on them, right? These are definitions. And basically, if you hit a certain threshold of 10%, right? 10% of your floor space, 10% of your display area, sign area, inventory. If you pass 10% of tobacco and hemp products in your place of business, you are going to be qualified as a retail sales of tobacco and hemp, right? It's a definition of the zoning ordinance. So it puts you into a new category, which we don't have. Right now, like a vape shop just comes in, it is a retail store, period. And so, right, there's no discrimination between them. And so the reason for doing this is just from a public health perspective, and we can go through, and there's a lot of documented research, right? The prevalence and proximity of vape shops at these institutions, the places where kids are, just leads to like long-term bad health outcomes. And so like there's a rational reason for us to regulate them and provide some spacing, distancing. So what this does is it says, hey, it's going to limit it to certain zoning districts, which we looked at our ordinance, so it's a handful, it's like 10 or 12 districts, where we allow, I'll say, other uses that we want to keep away from youth, so retail sales of liquor, adult stores, trying to think of the other two, lodging houses, and there's one other. So it limits it to these 12 districts, but then it's a conditional use, that you have to get a conditional use permit, which is recommended by planning commission, approved by council, subject to a whole bunch of requirements, mainly about buffering. So it can't be within 1,000 feet of a residential district, 1,000 feet of a school, a daycare, a church, place of worship, a library, a park. So there are a lot of buffers around in terms of like where these things cannot be. If we use 1,000 feet, could we use 1,000 feet for a lot of other buffering distances? A lot of other municipalities use 1,000 feet. So it takes off the by right opportunity for these establishments to establish themselves. So that paper is up. Planning Commission recommended approval with an amendment regarding some of the definitions. And so we can discuss how those come down, but ultimately, once that goes into place, no new establishment will be able to come forward. And with that, you've got a whole bunch of them around. So I think one of the things that I've said is, well, we also, part of the buffering requirements are to, you can't be within 1,000 feet of another establishment for retail tobacco. Well, we don't know what those are, because, right, you don't have to like claim that now. So part of our zoning research will be identifying where those are at, and as part of that, we're also, I'll say, probably gonna be checking for some compliance, like with zoning, right? And also with building code, and making sure that you're safe and up to date. Maybe you have a business license to operate, so just making sure that these are code compliant for the ones existing. It will be grandfathered in, unless somehow, again, General Assembly gives us power to do things differently. But I think this can at least put a stop to new ones proliferating in some of the areas where it should not be located.
Thank you, yes.
Where do marijuana shops fit in this?
Yeah, so they do and they don't. One of the things we also have been thinking about is, right, like, there's good probability that, the retail user distribution will probably come to light sometime within the foreseeable future. As right now, depending on where the General Assembly puts it into like Code of Virginia for these things, the way it's written right now, if they keep it in the hemp section of code, and don't quote me on what that statute is, but this would fall into those. And so this would be a part of that. I think one of the things that has been, discussed is, I'd say it all depends on what the General Assembly does in terms of like, if you're going to be a retail establishment for marijuana, like what other stipulations are you going to have? Are you going to have to be licensed? Are you going to have to do certain things in terms of like security or protocols? I mean, some states have like really put a lot of additional regulations on, and so therefore like they're different from just a regular tobacco retail outlet that doesn't have any other types of regulations. So I will say probably more to come, but part of the reason is thinking about like, yes, this is a potential for them to be maybe regulated under this ordinance. It just depends what the General Assembly does, but this, I think, prepares us, at least for being able, if we need to amend, to do so quickly.
Thank you. Any other questions for our planning director?
Have you considered hold points to allow the infrastructure to catch up with the density of your vision? And why I'm asking that is from my perspective, you're planning to greenlight just exponential growth if it comes, and feels very laissez-faire, feels very pro-developer. There's a kind of vision of these big things that keep popping up like mushrooms. That's kind of the dream. But in order for that to work, you have to have a lot of infrastructure. A bus network that doesn't exist, a parking that doesn't exist, a sewer and water system. We talked about that. And I may have missed it, but I didn't see any parks, didn't see any green spaces. We talked about that. Didn't see any schools. So I'm wondering, is this all kind of young, unmarried people without kids? Is that the vision? So I could see where maybe you could say, well, we'll allow this much growth and then let the infrastructure catch up. That'd be a whole point. Or the alternative could be, hey, it's unfettered growth. We have this kind of congested mess. And now we've got to build some infrastructure, sewer, water, everything to catch up. So it's just something for you to consider, because I can imagine. It doesn't look like that's part of it.
Yeah, so I will say, in terms of considerations of infrastructure, we are. And I was just saying, like, a case example right now is there's an affordable housing project that's being proposed in Southside and Steed Road. And staff has recommended against it. Even though, right, we are in desperate need of housing units, and the reasons are, number one, it doesn't meet the future land use. The future land use is residential, and the density proposed is above what residential recommends. But then secondly, there are concerns about the infrastructure in the area and the ability to handle it. One of the primary safety ones is, right, I mean, it's just down the road from, it's like on the elementary school. There's no sidewalks, right? You're on Sneed Road, 2 lanes, ditches. You can't get there from here. So, there are concerns about not moving that project forward because of the lack of infrastructure. I think, this is the quintessential Sin City problem, right? Do you build the infrastructure and then they come Or do you wait for them to come to generate the property tax revenue to generate the infrastructure? And there's trade-offs both ways, and that is, if you build all the infrastructure and then nobody comes, or you build in the right place, you're left holding the bag for a lot of expensive things. Or if you wait too long until after the development comes, then you end up and then I can't build my way out of this because I'm already too congested. So I think that is something that has been discussed in terms of both with again, we'll be updating the master plan. There's been internal conversations about, and I will say, in addition to the working groups that we've been having externally, internally we've been having working groups with parks, with DP, with DPW, to try and better understand, hey, are there cases where there aren't pipes, or there aren't streets, or there aren't sidewalks, or in terms of transit, trying to understand what areas have capacity and what areas don't. So I will say that is part of the conversation as we go forward. It may not be as prevalent in some of the discussions, but it is happening.
It doesn't have to be either or, it can be incremental. So you could, as part of your plan, you could say, hey, when we get to this population, we need to have this much of a network. I'm really talking about transportation. I don't know how many people took the bus here, not many, because I don't think a bus comes here. My work is gonna move to Mechanicsville. I don't know how I'm gonna get there and take the pulse now. So, if you execute the vision, you do need that transportation to make it work, unless you change the vision. Or you could say, hey, we're gonna get to this point, and at that point, we're gonna make sure we have this many buses. We're really talking about transportation.
Yes, and I will say, this is something that I'm not sure a council member about, is making sure, and I think we have a good opportunity now, new mayor, new CIP, is making sure the planning commission is involved in the CIP process. In terms of where we talk about our projects, where we talk about spending money, it is obviously related, right, to growth and where it's happening or where it's not happening. And I will say one of the things that we are going to have to be doing in our next master plan update, which is also going to start later this year, I'll acknowledge, for whatever reason, we did not do enough coordination with schools in Richmond 300, and we need to do it because we are growing. And this is the thing too, right, in terms of, providing housing units. I have no way to control who is moving into those housing units and whether or not they have kids and whether or not they're sending those kids to public schools. So trying to understand what the potential may be, but I do know that in terms of the south side, they're bursting at the seams in some of those schools. And so if we're going to say, hey, this area is going to develop, I'll say infrastructure, not just transportation is very important, but what are the other facilities that we also need to have along with this? So it is an ongoing conversation, but I do appreciate you bringing up that point.
I knew this would be the most popular part of our agenda, and I've already talked to Director Bonk about potential of having just a standalone meeting to talk about this. They already have meetings scheduled for the planning department on code refresh that are open to the whole city, right? But I do think each district has slightly different concerns, and I think it's worthwhile, to maybe get someone on the calendar for that. Been talking about potentially grouping it with the 5th district, because we have some similar characteristics. So there's more to come on that. Again, I'm here to both listen, receive your questions and comments, but please make sure you are also putting these into the formal engagement process. Because there's a lot of good comments. We're not all coming from the same point of view. I do think we all want to see a city that thrives, but we maybe have different ideas of how we're going to get there. So I also appreciate the respectful dialogue. So thank you for the questions. And with that, we have about 15 minutes left. And I will, if it's okay with everyone, if they have more questions for Dr. Bonk, I'll move into just sort of general updates from my office. Does that sound good? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Bonk. I think this one's working a little better. So obviously we build our agendas around what we think is most interesting and topical for our constituents. We spent a lot of time on, schools, the Heat Island environmental crisis, and code refresh. I just want to touch on a couple other things not gonna try and get through everything because you may have something else that you want to bring forward. But we did have an announcement today that we have a new finance director. Came out at 3:30. Her name is Letitia Shelton. She comes from Virginia Beach. So I'm excited to meet her. This was, announcement just this afternoon. I read just a little blurb about her, but she had been at the city before and has been doing great work with Virginia Beach. Excited to have her here with us. The budget is something that we're starting to talk about. Really, you need to talk about the budget all year round if you want to represent your district and elevate the things that you think are critical. So right now, we're talking about that budget process, and I'm on a task force with our finance chair, Ellen Robertson, on what should the schedule for this process look like this year, making sure we understand how to best elevate the priorities of our constituents and work with a new administration that's coming along, and they have their own strategies for a successful budget year. All under this heavy cloud that we have frozen the land bug this year. So we're not expecting a lot of new revenues because we've talked about this a few times in our newsletter, but we're trying to get on a better calendar schedule for when our city assessor assesses real estate. And this is like kind of a technical conversation, but the long and short of it is we froze it, so you're not gonna see an increase in your property tax bill this year, so that we can get on a better schedule, more like the counties, so that when we develop our budget, we have a clearer sense for what those incomes are gonna be, because as it has been, we get those estimates kind of at the end of our budget process, and sometimes we have more revenue, sometimes we have less, and then you're kind of starting over in the budget process at the 11th hour. Anyway, so that frozen budget means we're not gonna have sort of the heydays we've had the last few years of, everyone's, for better and worse, your property values are going up, that's great, you're not losing value of your home, it's more revenue for the city. It is hard when that check comes in, or that bill. We just talked about vape shops. At this point, I feel very exasperated about the topic. There's one behind Dogwood now, it's ridiculous. How many are on Broad Street? 10? Seems like 2 on every block. So, just this afternoon, I sent a photo of another one, and I sent it to our city attorney and said, can we do a moratorium? Like, what can we do while we're waiting to get this legislation passed? Because it's just, to me, ridiculous. If that's something that you care about, please also speak to our General Assembly representatives. We need more tools to regulate these things. Next meeting, I'm very excited about, we will have our DPW team here, Bobby Vincent, the director, to talk about CIP projects for the coming year. Things like the Author Bridge, which we have federal funding for, bike lanes, sidewalks, paving, speed bumps, all the things that got funded in the last budget. And then we will have our new CAO, OD Donald. So, and probably there'll be some bonus items that get put on the agenda for next month. But with that sort of quick recap of what else has been going on, is there anything that you guys have questions or topics that you want to hear about, or comments that you would like to share in this meeting? Yes?
Do you support legalizing annexation?
I think we've already been told that we cannot annex any more property, so I'm gonna work with the constraints we have, which is, these are the square miles that we have to work with. So unfortunately, this is what we have, and I know it's easy to think like, it's not easy, but I know personally I've gotten excited about all kinds of things we could request with charter changes. The reality of trying to get a charter change or annexation or some other large change to the way our city is shaped or operated is really difficult. So I'm focused on what we have before us. Thanks. Anyone else? Yes?
So it was mentioned earlier about the permeable pavers being a solution to the flooding. So that seems to me like a good idea, because all that development up there, like, it's all old vacant industrial, formerly vacant industrial land for the most part, where nobody's really being disturbed by it, but that is increased demand on the man-made drainage that we cannot and will not be able to afford anytime soon to upgrade or get the assistance to upgrade, to replace the natural drainage that putting up this building is getting rid of, but the streets, is there any way maybe that with the streets could be, at least the smaller ones, maybe not Arthur Ashe Boulevard, made more permeable, the streets and the curbs, so that way, when the drainage gets backed up, the streets don't turn into rivers, and then the water turns into lakes at the bottom of the hills, and then eventually rises above the curbs when the drainage system gets backed up?
I mean, I would love that. I mean, when we have extreme flooding, it has huge impacts across the city. I mean, every time there's a rain. You know, there's certain problematic drains and corners that get flooded every single time. So, one thing that's actually in this book, in addition to the, such a challenging microphone, the permeable pavers and things like that, is when the city is coming back in to do any infrastructure work, let's say sidewalks. Maybe we can grow our tree wells. So instead of having tree wells that are, isolated squares, maybe it's a long ribbon of tree well, so that you have more, less permeable surface. So as far as wholesale replacing roads, it's just super challenging because of the extensive cost involved. But I'm open to any ideas, and it's something that we're all gonna have to collaborate on. Thanks.
VDOT has done permeable concrete up there up in Goochland and in a couple other park and ride places. It's a new material. It's permeable concrete. It allows the water to soak in and seep in. It maybe is something you could try here. As you redevelop the parking lot, it wouldn't pay for itself to just rip up a good parking lot. But if you're rebuilding one or repaving one, it's one that goes.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, I love this conversation, so it's fun that there are other people who want to talk about it too. But, the more we can have cooler microclimates also, I think does help. So, it's something we have to tackle. And Director Vincent has, I think, used a good analogy before where, we actually have a lot of drains and big pipes in our CSO system. But imagine your own sink. If you dump a whole bucket in that sink at once, it's gonna back up and it's gonna take a while to flow down. So it's sort of two things. How do we provide more areas for that moisture or rain to flow, but then also how can we slow down those extreme intense rains? But I love how green this audience is. The Green City Commission, now Sustainable Resilient City Commission, is a great place to get engaged in this topic. Anything else? Yes.
I was just gonna say, this popped up on my social media. There's a flood risk mapper on social media for RVA. So I think it allows citizens to go in and report that. So they're collecting information. I think it's through FEMA, if FEMA still has any money left.
Yes.
But anyway, so I think people are charging that around the city. So, you might want to do a search on social media.
Yeah, that's great. And then obviously if you see a clogged drain, please report it to 311, or if you have the time or interest, in a rake or sturdy stick, I've gone out and cleared out drains on my block. It's really gratifying. Community. But really appreciate everyone coming. I'll be lingering around afterwards for a little while. And if you had questions you weren't comfortable asking, please just email our office and we'll get back to you. And if we don't, email us again. Sometimes things get stuck in junk. And we don't mean to ignore any email.